We gather here not as conquerors or subjects, but as observers of history. Our assembly's purpose is to dissect the British Empire's rise, reign, and precipitous fall.
A subject I know well, fraught with both glory and grim shadow. The empire, on which the sun never set, also cast long shadows.
Indeed, the allure of conquest and the quest for glory are eternal. My conquests laid the foundations of empires, yet I find the British endeavor a curious case of ambition and folly.
Ambition, Alexander? Perhaps a reflection of your own pursuits. The British, much like Rome, sought not just land but the imposition of culture, governance, and control.
The British Empire indeed sought to bring civilization as Rome did, yet it navigated uncharted waters, harnessing the sea to unite the world under its dominion.
Civilization, or domination. The empire brought railways and telegraphs, yet it shackled the very people it claimed to civilize, stripping away layers of cultural identities.
Yet, it is undeniable that the empire forged global connections that have shaped the modern world. The English language itself is a testament to that legacy.
Let us then proceed to examine this colossus, not just through the lens of its architects and beneficiaries, but through the eyes of those who bore its weight. Welcome. Our first matter is the exploration and expansion that marked the early days of the British Empire. Alexander, your military campaigns were legendary. How do you view the British approach to expansion?
Thank you, George. The British, like my own forces, understood the sheer necessity of establishing a presence far from home. What differentiates us, however, is the sea. My empire was built through land conquests, the British through their mastery of the oceans. But the goal was the same: to bring the world under one dominion, to find and to hold.
Indeed, Alexander. But our naval endeavors were not mere quests for land. The defeat of the Spanish Armada opened up the seas and marked the dawn of British naval supremacy. These were not just military victories, but doorways to new worlds, freed from the clutch of Spain, ripe for exploration and civilization. Our empire was built on the waves, in the spirit of adventure and discovery.
Adventure for some meant annihilation for others. The spirit of discovery often blinded you to the spirits you discovered. Colonization was not the civilizing mission you claim, Elizabeth, but a grave assault on the cultures you found. The British, like all empires, took not just land, but the rights of people, disregarding the civilizations they overwhelmed.
But Mahatma, is conquest not the nature of any empire? To spread its culture, its governance, over those it deems less civilized?
To believe oneself entitled to rule over another because of a perceived sense of superiority is folly. True civilization lies in respect and understanding, not dominance.
Yet the expansion brought trade, prosperity, and advancements to the savages. We gave them a part of our glory, our advances.
Prosperity for the empire, perhaps, but at what cost to those colonized? Prosperity built on the backs of the oppressed is no prosperity at all.
I find this debate fascinating. The British expansion, like Rome's, was strategic. But your methods, the British East India Company, for example, was a clever guise. Rome took direct control. The British often ruled indirectly through commerce. A more modern approach, maybe more insidious. Caesar, that insidious approach, built the modern world. The British Empire laid the foundations for global trade, law, and governance. Without our exploration and colonization, much of the world would have remained in darkness.
Darkness, Winston, is a matter of perspective. Cultures thrived long before the British arrived. Your light extinguished many of them. It's clear that the motifs of exploration and expansion evoke strong sentiments and contrasting views. The justification of empire and its repercussions remain a contentious legacy. Let's delve further into the mechanisms of empire building in our next segment. Let us delve into the pivotal role of the British East India Company in establishing the British Empire. Its strategies, governance, and the balance with royal authority shaped an era. Caesar, your analysis?
The British East India Company exemplifies control through strategic governance, reminiscent of our Roman principles. We built Rome on the foundation of rigorous organization and military prowess. The company, too, expanded British rule through strategic outposts, not unlike our distant garrisons. Yet, their method of intertwining commerce and governance was ingeniously malign. Indeed, Caesar, but unlike Rome's conquests for glory and dominion, the East India Company's was a conquest for wealth, draped in the guise of trade. The geopolitical chessboard was their arena, India the prize. They wielded economic power to subjugate kingdoms without the crown's direct intervention, a model of colonialism outsourced.
The company represented a novel era where monarchs and private entities shared the stage of global expansion. My reign saw the defeat of the Spanish Armada, laying the groundwork for British naval supremacy. Yet it was the company that navigated these waters to economic ends. Still, their autonomy was a double-edged sword, enriching the realm but at the cost of overseeing direct rule in India.
Your strategies, both military and economic, are commendable, but lacked the personal touch of leadership I valued. Where I led my men to the ends of the known world, the company led by proxy, a detachment that seems to me a cold method of governance. Wealth flowed, but at the expense of unity and the loyalty of the governed.
Alexander, you understand leadership, yet the company's impersonal approach epitomized the efficiency of modern bureaucracy. Their ledger books may have lacked the personal glory of conquest, but they forged an empire where the sun never set, a feat neither Rome nor Macedonia could claim. The company's blunder, however, lay in its hubris, underestimating the spirit of the nations it sought to control. India was not just a jewel to be set in Britain's crown, but a vibrant civilization. The revolt of 1857 was a stark reminder that the ledger cannot account for the human spirit.
The East India Company's legacy is a testament to exploitation and oppression. It wasn't merely a trading entity. It laid the framework for a system that would drain India of its wealth, undermine its traditions, and sow seeds of division that persist to this day. It was a corporate conquest where profit outweighed humanity.
Yet, Mahatma, from the perspective of statecraft, it was an entity that demonstrated the power of navigation, negotiation, and sometimes nefarious means to expand an empire's reach. The balance between royal authority and such entities was delicate, often fraught with tension, but fundamentally altered the nature of imperial rule.
It illustrates a shift from empires built by emperors and kings to those constructed by companies and commerce. The ancient and medieval worlds gave way to modern capitalism, birthing empires not solely of land and people, but of markets and trade routes.
A transition, perhaps, from the honor of the battlefield to the calculative coldness of the boardroom. Yet each empire, built on the ruins of another, seeks immortality. The British dreamt as did we. Their methods, though less martial, were no less ambitious.
And in ambition's shadow lurks the spectre of downfall. The company's fall signaled the beginning of the end for British control in India. Its legacy, a reminder that empires, whether built by sword or coin, stand not eternal, but subject to the tides of time and the will of the governed.
A profound discussion, reflecting on the complexities of empire, governance, and the consequences of wielding immense power. The East India Company, as we've explored, was more than a mere trading entity. It was a cornerstone in the edifice of the British Empire, with impacts echoing to this day. Let's delve into the Industrial Revolution's role in shaping the British Empire. Its technological advancements fundamentally changed the empire's nature. Winston, your thoughts on its impact?
The Industrial Revolution, Britain's finest hour in innovation. It transmuted our small island kingdom into the workshop of the world. Railways, steamships, the telegraph, these weren't mere innovations. They were the sinews of our empire, stretching across continents. Yet let's not blind ourselves with pride. The costs were substantial, both at home and in the colonies.
Indeed, Winston. An empire's strength lies not just in conquest, but in the ability to integrate and utilize new territories. My phalanxes moved swiftly across Persia due to the revolutionary logistics and military strategies we employed. Had I the steam engine or the telegraph at my disposal, who knows where the boundaries of my empire would have ceased.
While the Industrial Revolution indeed propelled our naval and global domination, it was the spirit of innovation and resilience during my reign that laid its groundwork. The Armada was defeated not by mere force, but by superior navigation and seamanship, foresights of what the Industrial Revolution would demand on a grander scale.
One cannot deny the technological marvels birthed during this era, but at what cost? The exploitation of the colonies for raw materials, the dehumanizing conditions in factories and plantations, mark this period as one of profound misery for the many. An empire that prides itself on the subjugation and exploitation of others sows the seeds of its own destruction.
Mahatma raises a crucial point, albeit one colored by his pacifist preferences. The Roman Empire thrived by integrating the conquered, sharing with them our arts, our laws. The British Empire, in its relentless pursuit of industrial and material power, often overlooked the importance of winning minds, not just exploiting bodies. This oversight, I wager, began sowing the seeds of resistance and eventual decolonization.
Caesar, your point is well taken, but remember that the British Empire also brought with it infrastructure, education, and a global lingua franca. Yes, there was exploitation and suffering, an unfortunate reality of all human history, including that of Rome. Yet one cannot overlook the contributions to human progress either.
Contributions, Winston, or impositions. The legacy of any empire must be weighed not just in its buildings and railways, but in the scars it leaves on societies, cultures, and peoples. True advancement does not necessitate domination and exploitation.
And yet history remembers conquerors. It remembers those who dared, those who ventured. Peace and justice are noble pursuits, Mahatma. But the world does not always bend to such ideals without strength, without the will to lead, and yes, to conquer.
Strength, Alexander, must be tempered with wisdom, and leadership with responsibility. The Industrial Revolution could have been a tool for universal betterment, under benevolent guidance. It's a ruler's duty to ensure progress benefits not just the crown, but also the common folk, at home and in the colonies.
This vigorous debate underscores the Industrial Revolution's complexity as both a boon and a bane within the British Empire. It transformed the empire, for better or worse, and its legacy is still debated, influencing how we perceive industrialization and imperialism today. Let us now delve into the Scramble for Africa and the Berlin Conference. The tactics, the strategies, the sheer audacity of imperialism in Africa. How does this reflect upon us as leaders, and what lessons are there to be gleaned?
Divided impera, a principle as old as Rome itself. The European powers, Britain included, carved Africa without a whisper of consent from its people. It was strategy over humanity, a display of power and cunning that reshaped a continent. Yet the repercussions of such division echo through the ages. A short-term gain, but at what cost?
The seas have always whispered of new lands to conquer, of wealth and glory beyond the horizon. Yet the scramble for Africa was no noble quest. It was greed, plain and simple. My reign saw the early days of empire, where power was sought but also respected. Africa's partition was a cold calculation, devoid of the honor of battle or the consent of the governed. Strategic importance cannot be understated. Africa was a jewel in the crown of the empire. The resources, the positions of power it afforded. Yes, it was imperialism, but it was also a game of international chess. And Britain played to win. We brought order, governance, and inevitably, progress. The justifications were of their time, and they should be seen as such.
It was neither order nor progress. It was subjugation, exploitation. To justify imperialism by the mask of civilization is to ignore the voices of millions who suffered under its yoke. Africa's wealth was plundered, its cultures trampled upon, and its people enslaved. The legacy of such conquest is not glory but sorrow and struggle for self-determination.
Conquest has always been the father of civilization, but the scramble for Africa was a conquest with no honor. As a conqueror, I sought to blend cultures, to rule with respect for the defeated. Africa was not conquered, it was butchered, parceled out like meat in a market. There is strategy, and then there is greed. The Berlin Conference was the latter.
And yet, gentlemen, lady, none can deny the world was forever changed. Rome's methods, Britain's empire, all conquests shaped the course of history. Africa's subjugation was indeed regrettable, but sparked a global reevaluation of imperialism. From the ashes of conquest, nations can arise, stronger and more resilient.
That's a romantic view, Julius, but the empire did indeed set the stage for a globalized world. Our language, our laws, our governance spread far and wide. It's a complex legacy, not black and white.
The price of such civilization was too high. Cultures destroyed, lives lost, and for what? A globalized world where the West dictates terms, independence was achieved, not gifted. Our resilience should not be seen as justification for our oppression.
The strength of a ruler lies not in the lands they conquer, but in the respect they command. Africa deserved better. We all did.
It's clear the scramble for Africa is a contentious chapter in our shared history. Power, strategy, civilization, all wielded at great cost. This discussion underscores the vast differences in perspective on empire and its consequences. Our focus now shifts to the naval power and its pivotal role in sustaining the British Empire. The Royal Navy's dominance on the seas was a cornerstone of empire building. Queen Elizabeth, your reign saw the defeat of the Spanish Armada. How do you view the importance of naval power in your time and its legacy?
The sea is a fickle mistress, yet she was ever at England's side during my reign. With the Armada's defeat, we declared to the world not just our naval supremacy, but our sovereign right to explore, to trade, and to colonize. The Royal Navy was not merely a tool of war, but a bringer of peace, a guardian of commerce. My successors built upon this, turning the Navy into the sinews of our empire, ensuring that Britannia ruled the waves. Yet let us not forget, the power we wielded on the seas often came with a heavy hand, sometimes heavier than I would have preferred.
Ah, indeed, Your Majesty. The Royal Navy was the shield and the spear, protecting our island, projecting our strength across the globe. Through 2 world wars, the Navy held firm. But let's not romanticize. Naval power, while essential, was also an instrument of subjugation, bullying the seas into submission. It's a dual-edged sword, one that carved out an empire where the sun never set but also sowed the seeds of resentment in its wake.
Your reliance on naval power is intriguing. In my time, we conquered the known world through the might of our phalanxes and the speed of our cavalry. The sea was a barrier more than a thoroughfare, yet I see the wisdom in ruling the waves. An empire that spans continents cannot rely solely on land. Your ships connected the dots of your empire, much as my roads did for mine. Still, one has to ponder, if the strength of your empire relied so heavily on naval power, what vulnerability did that present?
Alexander raises an astute point. In Rome, we understood that control of the Mediterranean was crucial, but it was just one piece of the puzzle. The British leaned heavily on their navy, perhaps too heavily at times. Strength in one area often masks weakness in another. The Roman approach was to balance, legions on land, galleys on sea. Your navy won battles, but it could not win the hearts of those you conquered. Power projects fear, not love.
Perhaps, Caesar, yet without our navy, the wealth that flowed into Britain, the very prosperity of our people and the stability of our realm would have been naught but a dream. Our navy allowed us not just to defend, but to reach out, touching every corner of the globe. Is that not a form of connection, albeit one forged in iron?
A connection built on subjugation is no true connection, Your Majesty. The seas you ruled also carried chains for slaves, opium for China, and soldiers to enforce your rule in foreign lands. The Royal Navy may have been your crown jewel, but for many, it was a bearer of sorrow. True strength, I believe, lies not in the ability to conquer and dominate, but in the ability to connect and liberate. Your navy brought the world closer, yet it also kept it apart, imposing an empire's will over the voice of the colonized.
Gandhi, your perspective is always enlightening, though we must argue that protection and projection were necessary for our nation's survival and prosperity. The world was not a benign place, and without the Royal Navy, our story, the very fabric of the modern world, would look profoundly different.
This discussion illuminates the paradox at the heart of empire, the balance between control and connection, between sea power as a conduit for empire and as a vehicle for subjugation. Our perspectives are as varied as the seas are vast, but it's clear that naval dominance was both Britain's strength and its Achilles heel. Let's delve into the effects of British colonization on indigenous populations and cultures. Mahatma, your thoughts? Colonization, in essence, tore apart the very soul of indigenous societies. The British, with their insatiable appetite for control, systematically dismantled our social structures, economies, and cultures. In India, we went from a rich tapestry of self-sufficient communities to dominions under the crown, stripped of autonomy and dignity. This isn't just history, it's a legacy of loss and displacement that still echoes today.
But Mahatma, conquest, and the founding of empires have always led to cultural exchanges that in many cases have benefited humanity. My own conquest spread Hellenistic culture across continents, blending with local traditions in ways that enriched them.
Alexander, I must agree. Conquest does bring about a melding of cultures. Rome wasn't built in a day, nor did it expand without assimilating and learning from the conquered. Look at our adoption of Greek culture and wisdom. It's naive to view these interactions solely as destructive.
There's a certain arrogance in claiming cultural superiority and enforcing it upon others, Julius. My reign saw the beginning of England's naval dominance and the first steps toward empire. Yet, as queen, the moral quandaries of subjugating foreign peoples troubled me. Surely, the crown benefited, but at what cost to the humanity of those we claim dominion over?
Let's not be too quick to don sackcloth and ashes. The British Empire brought the rule of law, infrastructure, and even democracy to the far corners of the globe. Yes, there were failings, profound ones, but it's overly simplistic to condemn colonization in its entirety. Progress often demands sacrifice.
Sacrifice, Winston? One cannot simply dismiss the subjugation of millions, the plunder of resources, and the suppression of native cultures as necessary sacrifices for progress. Progress who? By whose standards? Colonialism wasn't a pathway to mutual growth. It was exploitation masked as civilization.
Yet, was not the spread of Latin a foundation for languages, law, and literature across Europe, a form of cultural enrichment? Empires bring order, structure, and often peace.
Indeed, Caesar, the imposition of a so-called superior culture or order upon another invariably involves destruction and assimilation. Yet history sometimes looks kindly upon these actions, citing the eventual emergence of new, blended cultures and innovations. It's a double-edged sword, this business of empire.
It's one thing to share and exchange culture, another to impose and obliterate. The Elizabethan era may have sown the seeds of British imperialism, but I cannot help but reflect on the wisdom of understanding and respecting the sovereignty of peoples. Might should not make right.
The most significant impact of colonization was not in the supposed benefits it brought, but in the voices it silenced. In India, we fought not just for independence from British rule, but for the revival of our cultural identity, our traditions, and our ways of life. The true cost of empire is measured in the loss of a people's soul. This debate illustrates the complexities of empire and colonization. Both the gains and losses are profound, leaving legacies that today's nations still grapple with. Our understanding of these impacts shapes not only how we view history, but how we approach the future. Let's turn our focus to the economic implications of the empire, both its enrichments and impoverishments. Who would like to lead?
I shall begin. The essence of empire, in Rome as in Britain, is the flow of wealth from the periphery to the center. This extraction, akin to Rome's tribute system, underpinned our strength and the splendor of our cities. Yet unlike Rome, Britain clothed these practices in the guise of trade and civil service. Is this not an edifice built upon sand?
Ah, Julius, Rome conquered with the sword in hand, while Britain, admittedly also not averse to using force, often preferred a ledger book and a law court. The economic benefits to Britain were immense, making it the workshop of the world. Yet, these achievements were not without their shadows. The costs to the colonies were steep, extracted wealth, disrupted economies, and dependent development.
It is precisely this imbalance that festers wounds deep in the psyche and economies of the once colonized. Wealth flowed like blood from these lands to the empire's heart, leaving scars of poverty and underdevelopment. The true cost of empire is measured in the stifled potential and plundered resources of its colonies.
Whilst acknowledging these points, let us not forget the role of royal governance in the spread of economic systems. My reign saw adventurers and merchants extend the realm's reach, bringing back wealth, but also establishing a global trade network. Yet I concede, the empire's ledger does have its debits as well as its credits.
In my campaigns, I sought to meld cultures and economies, creating a syncretism that propelled forward the regions I conquered. The British Empire's attempt at economic dominance, however, often disregarded the synergies of such cultural exchanges. Prosperity was hoarded rather than shared, leading to a legacy of division.
But Mahatma, Alexander, must we not also acknowledge that the infrastructures established, the railways, the legal systems, the lingua franca, laid a foundation for future international cooperation and economic development?
Infrastructure imposed without consent, Winston, serves the builder before the inhabitant. Freedom to choose one's path to development is the cornerstone of true prosperity. The shadow of imperialism obscures the potential for a self-determined future.
The wealth of the empire, then, built on the expectation of perpetual dominance, mirrors the flaw of all empires: hubris. Britain reaped rewards but sowed the seeds of its own decline by creating economies dependent yet resentful, rich in resource but impoverished in autonomy.
Our discussion affirms the complexity of empire's economic legacy. Prosperity for some has indeed meant hardship for others. The challenge remains in reconciling these divergent experiences.
Indeed, this conversation reflects the diversity of outcomes from the British Empire's economic enterprises. The achievements and the deprivations are both part of its enduring legacy. Let us carry forward this nuanced understanding as we proceed.
The empire's influence on global trade and the world economy was nothing short of revolutionary. We laid down the laws of the sea, so to speak, and everyone else played by our rules. It introduced a level of stability the world hadn't seen.
Stability? Your empire forced open markets and imposed trade on terms favorable to itself alone. We conquered, yes, but we also created, shared knowledge, built cities. It was not merely about exploiting resources.
Indeed, Alexander, but let us not romanticize our own conquests. The British, however, strategically positioned themselves on trade routes similar to the way we Romans did with roads. The difference is, they used the seas, covering a far broader canvas. Their impact on global trade dynamics was effective, if not always honorable.
Our naval power was instrumental in setting the stage for a global exchange that I believe benefited many. We fostered connections between continents that allowed for not just the exchange of goods, but of culture and ideas. It was our duty to lead and bring civility, in our view, to the world.
Benefited many, but at what cost, Your Majesty? The global trade established under the British Empire was built on the exploitation of colonies and their people. It's a system that extracted wealth from the many for the benefit of the few, creating lasting economic disparities.
Mahatma, with the greatest respect, the economic benefits reaped by Britain were necessary for the development and security of the realm. Without such measures, we wouldn't have had the means to contribute to world affairs as we did.
And yet, without your empire, the world might have seen a more equitable distribution of wealth and power. Your sea routes were chains as much as they were channels.
An interesting point, Alexander. Empires impose order, but often at the cost of freedom. British control of global trade routes allowed for the imposition of economic systems that served the empire's interests first.
Our aim was not merely enrichment. We aimed to bring the modern world to those who we considered in need. The establishment of these trade routes indeed increased my nation's wealth, but it also spread the knowledge and progress of the Enlightenment.
Enlightenment at the barrel of a gun, or in your case, the broadside of a ship, does not enlighten at all. It subjugates and controls. The true cost of these global trade networks was the freedom and prosperity of colonized nations.
History is written by the victors, Mahatma, and while I respect your astuteness, the prosperity and stability that the empire brought to the world stage cannot be understated.
Perhaps, instead of stability, what your empire offered was order, a rigid framework to ensure your dominance. True stability respects the sovereignty and well-being of all states and peoples.
Let this spirited debate remind us that the consequences of empire are intricate and multifaceted. Whether for wealth, power, or supposed enlightenment, the legacy of these actions continues to shape the world economy and international relations to this day. We now turn to the period of decolonization and the independence movements that mark the end of the British Empire. It is a chapter filled with struggle, triumph, and transformation. Let's delve into the complexities of this pivotal era.
In the wake of the Second World War, Britain found itself financially drained and its global influence waning. It was a humbling time, recognizing that the sun was indeed setting on the British Empire. Independence movements across the colonies were not just whispers, but roars for freedom. It was clear the time had come for Britain to adjust its sails.
Independence is not merely the removal of foreign control, but the awakening of a nation's soul. The Indian independence movement was a beacon of nonviolence and civil disobedience, principles that resonate with the true spirit of freedom. The British Empire's attempt to quell this spirit only emboldened it. There's dignity in peaceful resistance, something empires built on conquest and subjugation could never comprehend.
While I understand the significance of achieving independence, it's important to remember that the legacy of the British Empire also laid down the administrative and legal frameworks upon which many of these countries built their new governance. It was a complex interweaving of cultures, albeit under circumstances far from equitable.
Indeed, relinquishing control was inevitable. An empire, vast as it may stretch, can only sustain its grip for so long. Just as my own conquests created the Hellenistic world, fostering a blend of cultures, the dissolution of the British Empire was a precursor to a new era of global relations. It's the cycle of history. Empires rise, they fall, and in their wake, new civilizations bloom.
Let us not romanticize the process, however. The transition was fraught with challenges and conflicts. An empire does not simply pack its bags and leave. It leaves behind a labyrinth of geopolitical, social, and economic issues. The end of the British Empire was a necessary step towards self-determination, but it was not without its birth pangs.
It's clear the path to independence was neither simple nor uniform across the British Empire. Each colony's journey bore its own trials, inspired by the universal desire for self-governance. Reflecting on these movements offers profound insights into the enduring struggle for national sovereignty and identity.
The empire endowed the world with the English language, a certain governance model, and even cricket. But let's not delude ourselves. The cost was high for the colonized. It was time to let the nations find their own way, craft their own destinies, without the shadow of the empire looming over them.
The true victory in independence lies in the ability to forge one's path, free from the shackles of domination. The era of colonization left deep scars across the world. Scars of division, of exploitation. The path forward requires acknowledgement, healing, and cooperation, shaping a world that cherishes diversity and fosters unity. Decolonization signified not just the end of an era, but the beginning of a new chapter in world history. It reshaped international relations and set the stage for the contemporary global order. Let's delve into the enduring impact of the British Empire on the modern world. Elizabeth, your thoughts?
The expanse and influence of the British Empire have bestowed upon the globe an indelible mark. Language and culture, primarily, are its lasting vestiges. Shakespeare's sonnets are now whispered in the valleys of the Himalayas, and the laws that govern the Isles now shape judgments in courts far from our own shores. Yet, these benefits cannot wholly overshadow the shadows it cast upon conquered lands.
Shadows, indeed. The legacy of the empire is not solely one of cultural exchange, but also of enduring division and strife. The arbitrary borders drawn by British rulers have sown discord in regions such as India and Africa, disputes that bleed into the current century. Benevolence in legacy cannot be claimed when sovereignty and dignity were often its sacrifices.
You speak of division, yet overlook unity. The Commonwealth, for example, stands as a testament to a shared history. It facilitates diplomatic and cultural exchanges among nations that once stood under a single banner. Despite its flaws, the British Empire forged global connections that arguably laid the groundwork for the interconnected world we enjoy today.
Connections, yes, but at what cost? My own conquests spread Hellenic culture, fostering an era of enlightenment and progress. Yet I recognize the importance of blending cultures, not imposing them. The British Empire, in its hubris, often failed to appreciate the wealth of civilization it encountered, choosing instead to enforce its own values and systems.
A fair point, Alexander. Yet governance requires the imposition of order. Without it, chaos prevails. The British Empire's attempt to instill a sense of stability, rule of law, and economic infrastructure, albeit self-serving, contributed to the development of nations. Rome, too, built roads and cities that lasted millennia. Is it not the duty of the conqueror to improve the conquered?
Such improvements should not be at the expense of humanity. Economic development cannot be disentangled from the exploitation that often fueled it. The wealth of the British Isles was built on the backs of those it enslaved and colonized. True legacy cannot ignore the suffering that accompanies conquest.
Yet we must also consider the global dialogue now possible because of this shared history. How we choose to move forward, learning from the past, defines us, not the actions of those long dead.
An empire, like a coin, bears two sides. While we must acknowledge the darkness of suppression and exploitation, we must also recognize the spread of ideas, technology, and governance that, in some cases, have uplifted societies.
Our debate underscores the complex legacy of the British Empire, marked by both achievement and atrocity. This reflection invites us to consider how we can address historical grievances while leveraging the positive remnants of that past to build a more equitable world. Let us be guided by the lessons learned rather than the divisions sown. As we approach the end of our discussion, I invite each of you to share your most poignant takeaway from today's exploration of the British Empire's legacy.
The British Empire, for all its flaws, was an institution of unparalleled scope and influence. Its language, laws, and customs have left an indelible mark on the globe. However, let us not forget that the price of empire was often paid in the blood and liberties of those it subjugated. It's a humbling reminder that power must be tempered with responsibility.
In the annals of history, the concept of empire is as ardently pursued as it is vilified. The British Empire's drive to connect the world mirrored my own ambitions, though our methods and eras differ greatly. The ultimate legacy of any empire is not in the land it conquered, but in the cultures it influenced and the dialogues it started, which persist long after its decline.
Empire, at its core, is about control of resources, territories, and peoples. The British managed this on an unprecedented scale, yet like all empires, they too learned that the grip of governance loosens with distance and time. The Roman Empire gave the world roads, laws, governance, contributions that persist. The British gave the world language and a complex web of global commerce, yet the cost of these gifts was often extracted with a heavy hand.
The strength of the British Empire lay not only in its navy or its economy, but in its adaptability. We responded to the call of the times, whether it was defeating the Armada or establishing a global trade network. However, one must acknowledge that our victories and expansions often came at a tremendous cost to others. The true test of leadership is recognizing these truths and learning from them.
The legacy of the British Empire is a testament to the power of resistance and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of oppression. Colonization brought suffering and division, but it also awakened a concerted struggle for freedom and self-determination across the world. The greatest lesson here is that peace and understanding are the most enduring foundations upon which any society should be built. Your insights have illuminated this topic from angles both broad and deeply personal. The British Empire's story is a complex tapestry of ambition, power, and humanity. As we have learned from history, it is crucial to remember the past to ensure that we move forward with empathy and wisdom. Thank you all for a thought-provoking discussion.